may we hold ourselves with gentle kindness, knowing that this liminal space is a gift, an opportunity to pause and reflect with family and friends on what it means to flourish, to let ideas and experiences ferment for 4 years and unfold with limitless possibilities. An opportunity to acknowledge the geography of our CC experience in all its complexities, and to invite in our contradicting emotions to be our guests in this present moment. May we embrace the gift of this time, and may the wisdom of what we hold as sacred surround us, giving us strength in our laughter and tears, our relief and unsettledness, to bless our experience of this place. Amen.
Dean Ashley, members of the Board of Trustees, families, friends, faculty and staff, those who weren't sure you would be here today to see this happen, members of the class of 2011. You can applaud anytime you want for yourselves. Let me begin by expressing my appreciation to Meng Yi for your beautiful performance. Can we provide another round of applause for that? Very talented, one of many very talented members of the class of 2011. And then we have the CC Tour Choir. And now I looked out at this gathering and I said to Susan Ashley, I haven't seen this show packed quite this way at Baccalaureate in my memory. Well, she said, it's probably for you. And I said, no, I'm a politician. I know better than to think that. Maybe for Miro, our speaker, I'm not sure, but perhaps for the touring choir, huh? I mean, the touring choir is fabulous. "50 years ago this spring, a group of CC students, along with their choral conductor, an extraordinary individual named Don Jenkins, stepped aboard CC buses to travel the country performing to national acclaim. The Colorado College Tour Choir continued for over 10 years. On campus this weekend for their 5th reunion, the choir has been renewing friendships and rehearsing to sing at our Baccalaureate today and for a concert this afternoon when we adjourn at Packard Hall. All of you are invited to attend. But the truth is, I've seen this place packed for Coretta Scott King when she came to speak. I've seen it packed for Arlo Guthrie when he came to play. But I think you're here for the class of 2011, right? This is not an occasion where I really talk. It's intended to be a moment of reflection for all of us before graduation. We pause in the midst of many celebrations on this special weekend. We pause to reflect on the past 4 years, or 5, or 6, or in my case, 9. And to think about the extraordinary education that you've attained, but also to think about the relationships that you've nurtured. Your relationships with professors and with classmates that have enriched your life, and perhaps most importantly, your relationship and understanding with that toughest of all friends, yourself. You are not the same person you are when you arrived here and began your Colorado College journey. And I know this, Colorado College is better for having each of you here. I arrived and they're not sure the president knows where to sit, right? So I get a sign that says Celeste, and this is where you're supposed to sit. Somebody penciled in, I suppose this is a note for me, but I think it's appropriate for the day. Take pride in a job well done. So, I believe that's not really a message just for me. I think it's a message for all of us who consider ourselves part of the class of 2011. For this reflective occasion, seniors elect a member of the faculty to speak. I'm proud now to present Senior Angela Cobian, President of the student body, to introduce this year's speaker, Environmental Science Professor Miro Kummel. Angela is a political science major and a Spanish minor from Englewood, Colorado. After graduation, she will be teaching bilingual 2nd and 3rd grade at Cole Arts and Sciences Academy in Denver through Teach for America. Please welcome my very special friend, Angela Cobian.
This afternoon, Sunday, May 22nd, 2011, marks the 137th Baccalaureate service of the Colorado College. My name is Angela Cobian, and as this year's student body president and graduating senior, it is my pleasure to welcome my fellow classmates, our families, faculty, staff, and distinguished guests to commemorate the end of our intellectual adventure at Colorado College. Baccalaureate services are traditionally described as a ceremony of worship, in rejoice and thanksgiving for lives that are forever dedicated to learning, wisdom, and discovery outside of our time at Colorado College. With respect to our journeys as lifelong learners, Galileo Galilei, the father of modern physics and science, noted that all truths are easy to understand once they're discovered. The point is to discover them. It is therefore no surprise that this year, the senior class chose one of the most beloved guides in our intellectual quest that is Colorado College. The father of mycorrhizal fungi and ecology and professor in the environmental program, Miroslav Kumel. Professor Miro Kumel is the epitome of the outstanding intellect, care, and quirk that Colorado College instructors put forth in our dedication to discovery, inside and outside the classroom. For Miro, it is literally outside as he researches how climate change affects the timberline on Pikes Peak. Miro often brings his students to the mountain, challenging them to not only unearth variables for the lab, but also truths that transcend the timberline. Senior Joel Miner describes him as deeply spiritual, someone who inspires students to think of their personal connection to the environment, and oftentimes teaches his class to meditate during the most intensive environmental inquiry block. Junior Ariel Roca, Miro's advisee, fondly recalls her favorite memory. Unsurprisingly, her class was on a field trip at the timberline on Pikes Peak. She notes that they were all chatting while Miro was sitting at the base of a tree, gently digging up the earth beneath him with his hands. Ari said, and I quote, "He suddenly found like 5 truffles. He was so excited because they're normally like $100 each. He kept them to use in experiments, or eat, I'm not sure." She further added that Miro knows everything about anything, especially the earth. Ari's comment is not far from the truth. At Princeton University, Miro received his bachelor's in ecology and evolutionary biology, studying the community ecology of phytoplankton, while later earning his PhD from the University of Michigan. Colorado College students are honored to hear him sit cross-legged on a counter and talk excitedly of evotranspiration and beyond. When I asked his wife and colleague, Professor Emily Chan, what his deepest inspiration is as a professor, she noted that Miro is motivated by seeing people grapple with difficult concepts and then getting it, figuring out answers themselves rather than someone telling them. This fact brings us back to Galileo's remark about the simplicity of understanding truth once it is discovered. That is, the transcendent aspect of a rigorous intellectual journey is not so much understanding truth when it is found, but to realize the critical thinking necessary to discover such truths within ourselves. To this end, Miro's excellence as a professor comes from his ability to not only share his passion with others, but to allow students to discover their own truths along the way. His latest project focuses on the intricate, self-generated spatial patterns in insect populations. To date, 6 students have worked on this project, while 4 of them have presented at national and international conferences. At 6,035 feet in the Rocky Mountain West, he has truly nurtured the life of the mind of his students and of the class of 2011. Thus, please join me in welcoming Professor Miro Kumel.
Hello, you may not know this about me, but I was well on the way of becoming a Carmelite monk, and this site makes me feel like I should have not given up on that, on that dream. Anyway, President Celeste, Board of Trustees, faculty, staff, parents, and most of all, you students, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be your speaker. This is a tremendous opportunity. Thank you. I'm going to talk about difficult things today. I'm going to talk about common ground, conflict, and reconciliation. Not only because we see the earth shake in the Middle East, but also we see our own country divided, and hopefully some of my thoughts and reflections are going to kind of help us understand that a little deeper. I took my class to Baca this block, and we visited with the Zen Buddhist monastery there. And the question that we posed to the monk Christian out there was, you know, there are so many ways that we can make a difference in the environment. There are so many ways that we can make a difference as people in the world. You know, what should we do? How should one decide? And Christian had a very interesting insight. He said, learn to make a distinction between what makes you a little bit more alive and a little bit less alive. Try to figure out what sets you on fire, and when you have a choice, choose life. Choose what sets you on fire. Choose what makes you alive, and then don't worry about it. Things will come and work out. So I want to talk a little bit about what set me on fire when I was just a little younger than you students, and what little difference it made in a process of conflict resolution and reconciliation. I grew up behind the Iron Curtain in a small town of about 20,000 people on the border between Czech and Austria. We were about a third military. There was about 50 tanks that were parked right across the street from my house and also my school. And you kind of think about this as gloomy, and it was, but you know, to a 6-year-old or 7-year-old, it's fun to be able to crawl through a tank. And how often do you get that chance anyway? So, but the regime was not kind. It was not kind to the children, it was not kind to the people. And as growing up as a teenager, you know, you always want to play with danger a little bit. So I became a member of the underground church, and I was part of a cell where we were printing books, you know, like what Penguin does. The last book that we printed was the Confessions of St. Augustine, and that was considered illegal activity, so kids can think that life is better out here, right? But, you know, what set me on fire was there was a student demonstration on November 17th, 1989 in Prague, and that demonstration was brutally beaten by the police. And then the government tried to keep things quiet. There was no news on television about it. They switched off our telephone at home so we couldn't call people. And the whole country was waiting for things to happen. Over many, many, many locations, spontaneous demonstrations arose, and there was a group of us 4 kids, age of about 17 to 21, your guys' age, and we were hanging out with a Protestant priest, and we told Father John, we ought to do something. There's 2 days and the town hasn't mobilized, so we discussed this carefully. It was not an easy decision. So a couple of us had packed up the church's audio system, and a couple of us had put out flyers, and Father John had made calls to other people, and we set a town meeting. Now, we brought 3,000 people to the town square. This is in a place where if you want to bring more than 15 people into a room, you have to have a permission from the government. So, you know, the response was overwhelming. We set up a station at the foot of this memorial to Black Death in the middle or rather memorial for thanks after the Black Death was done in the Middle Ages. And we set up the boxes and had an open mic. People came in and shared their stories. Some of the stories were heart-wrenching. The place was not a friendly place, as I told you, even including to my family. My great-uncle was sentenced to work in uranium mines, and he was for being a Franciscan monk. And he was released to go home to die after he contracted tuberculosis, a man of 6'5", coming back home weighing 100 pounds. My grandfather died of brain hemorrhage about 2 days before his arrest by the secret police. So we had a lot of grievances, as you could imagine. There was a lot of stuff that kept and opened up and bubbled out, and people were angry. Now, how do you keep 3,000 angry people from hanging the county officials on the lampposts, right? That's a good question. The county officials were present at the meeting, and they themselves were talking. So what we would do when the crowd got really angry is we would jingle our keys and we would lead the crowd to chant, "We are not like they are." And "Nejsme jako oni" was the, and so through working through this day after day, we kind of slowly built a platform, a meeting place, meeting place where the past and the present were together, where the grievances, the people that were hurt really, really badly, and the people that were responsible for that hurt could meet, not necessarily in harmony, if you will, but could meet. And you wonder, why did we do that? In part, we did it because we wanted a better future. We didn't think that violence was an answer to the violence. And in part, because the people responsible, well, they were us too. They were our neighbors, they were our cousins, they were our uncles, and we wanted to have a better vision than one that sees blood. Now, how do you build a platform like that? How do you start having a common ground with the opponent, with the enemy? I think that one has to start by acknowledging that the other has humanity. And when we do that, then I think good things will happen. And why acknowledge that is because they do have humanity. I'd like to share two stories that hopefully will bring this kind of little closer to us. And I thought about just telling one, but then I couldn't choose, so you got two. Okay. So this was as the government was falling down. My great friend Joe got arrested by Secret Service, and we didn't know where he was for 10 days. He came back and never spoke again. And the Secret Services demanded that the school be cleansed of elements like Joe, and we were scared. You can imagine how we were scared. But our school principal, who was member of the Communist Party, actually one of the highest ranking members in the region, stepped up and said, "You're not messing with my school. That's my kids, that's my school." And, you know, when it comes from a place that you don't expect, that really tells you that our principal had something in him, right? I have another story that I think illustrates it a little better. My grandmother in the Second World War was working in the resistance against the Nazi occupation. She was collecting food stamps and distributing them to families of political prisoners and families that had people executed in. And the Gestapo came to her office and brought her for interrogation. And so as she walked into the room, she saw two interrogators, one of whom she knew very well. This was the war met my grandma in her early 20s, about your guys' age. One of them she knew as a boy from high school, a boy who had a crush on her and whom she brushed away rather rudely, and she thought, oh dear, I'm not going to come alive out of this one. Well, what happened was that Gestapo officer offered her to translate from German to Czech for her, though she knew very well how to speak in German, and back translate. This offered Grandma Mary about 2 minutes to think about her answers. And then when he translated them back, then he translated them in the less incriminating manner, right? So I hope that these two stories kind of bring up the thought that the opponent, no matter how bad the opponent is a human being and is capable of being a human being. And so when we confront somebody, then we need to know that the other is a human. Now, I think it would be foolish to expect miracles like this to happen every day, but we have to allow for them. So, because if we do allow for them, then the conflict can happen on the common ground. And for the conflict to happen on the common ground opens up other possibilities than trench warfare, opens up other possibilities than us versus them. It does not mean that the conflict will go away. It does not mean that it's a kumbaya, everybody loves everybody, but it means that there is a platform that opens up possibilities that were not there before. You know, at the end of the day, we do not have another choice but let that happen. Have that common ground. Because if we stay in the us versus them, there is no winning. Again, I don't mean that one needs to compromise, but I mean that one needs to allow for the humanity and for the common ground and for that conflict to play out at that common ground. If one doesn't, then it is always we win, you win, we win, you win. Or if one thinks that one can win by destroying the opponent, then that brings up ghosts. And so on that story, I grew up, I told you, on the border between Czech and Austria. At the end of Second World War, 95% of the inhabitants of that region were removed forcibly for their part in the war effort because they were Sudeten Germans. For 60 years, we as a country were trying to suppress this. We never taught that at schools. We never really confronted it directly. It's just that the landscape always spoke to you, you know? You wondered, why is that house over there with a German name on it? Or where did that road lead that doesn't lead to anywhere? The landscape didn't make sense. And it's only now that both our side and the German side are able to come together and cross-invite each other and talk about our experiences with the landscapes. Now you understand, yes, you know, this makes sense. And they are also they're also interested in us talking to them about our stories with the landscape. And through this we have taken enemies, now we have a common ground. We have a common ground where we can meet. It doesn't mean that the conflict's away, but we can start approaching the conflict in other ways than denial. Now, you guys spent 4 years over here in a place that also had 95% or more of original inhabitants removed. This landscape too is a landscape that had people of another kind. And though we don't think about it all the time, I think that there needs to be a reconciliation over here under our feet, in the same way as there needs to be a reconciliation in the Czech. Now, that gets me to, so this gives me, I'd like to now take out the two kind of major pieces of what I was talking about and examine them a little bit under a microscope. So one was the common ground, right? How do you get a common ground? What does that mean? How can one live a common ground? And the other one is nature of conflict. And how can one deal with conflict on the common ground? So when you look back into philosophy, you find, I'd like to kind of quote a couple of my favorite people, the Heidegger and also Martin Buber. I hope that I'm not the only one that's reading Martin Buber. But Martin Buber has proposed that the world can be seen through two kinds of eyes. One eyes are the eyes of an eye that sees an it, and the other eye is the eye that sees a you. And that it is in that I-you space that life really happens. Back when we were at the monastery, talking to the Zen monk, Christian, the Zen monk gave us a koan to think about. And I think that's an interesting koan. It went something like that. I am also it, or that is also me. Said when one is confronting a situation or person that is not kind of naturally I or naturally me. So, next time one hears a politician talking about things that are really getting you angry, maybe you could think about, no, that is also me over there. That's also me. Can we have a platform? Can we disagree on a common ground? Now, or when you see a polluted river, no, that is also me. If you think about it, that's really how things are. We do not end at our skin. You imagine a little molecule of air over here, oxygen, right? We breathe it in, it gets into us, and now it's alive, and then we breathe it out, and it's dead. Does it make sense? It doesn't make any sense. If you think about it, we have, about 2 gallons of blood. At the rate that we are drinking water, we change our blood about every 4 days, the water in that is. Well, where was that water before it was our blood? We were flying in the sky about 4 days ago as clouds. So think about that border between us as being a very kind of flexible border that we could extend out. When I was in Michigan, I had the wonderful chance to be friends with an Anishinaabe elder. And Vashi Gizik told me this story that I think kind of gets at this kind of becoming, this flexibility of one's body. He said that his uncle was cutting grass when Ed was a little boy, and the uncle cut a rabbit with the sign. Those of you guys that probably have spent some time outside know that little rabbits like to hide. And so the sai came and cut all 4 legs of the bunny rabbit. And so there was this little creature with all 4 legs cut off in the hands of the uncle. And the uncle killed the rabbit and gave it to the little Indian boy and said, "Bring it to mom, she'll cook it, and the rabbit will grow new legs." And Ed said, "Huh? How is that bunny going to get new legs?" And Uncle said, "Your legs." So, you know, when on that end, that shows you that, you know, that sense of where is the boundary? Can the bunny's legs be the boy's legs, or rather the boy's legs be the bunny's legs? When you eat a bowl of cereal, those oats could have been a field, right? So having that field in you gives you some responsibility, maybe. Now, this kind of perception of a person having fuzzy boundaries, if you will, does have large ramifications to other things. Most of you have taken a class in political science or even in environmental science and have read about the tragedy of the commons, right? So to get the tragedy of the commons, you have a pasture, or rather, or more abstractly, you have a pool of resources where the benefit of extraction of those resources goes to one person, but the cost of extraction is distributed among people. And so the only way to respond to that is to abuse the commons, because I get all the benefits and everybody gets to share the costs. We have been kind of railroading ourselves, I think, into solving problems or conceptualizing problems in this way, in particular climate change. Now, if you look at what is necessary for tragedy of the commons to occur, then you have to have this particular setup of having benefits going to an individual and cost shared, but also you have to have individuals that have a very narrow self-interest. Their self-interest is only and only in getting the benefit, and they can't communicate to each other apart from using of the commons. Now, if you think about how real commons operate, if you think about the situation, and Hardin, who wrote the paper on tragedy of the commons, has us consider government intervention or top-down control of we all agree to coerce into each other into not using the resources that much. But a recent Nobel Prize in economics looking at the tragedy of the commons have showed that commons are fine in many places. And they are fine in places where people, individual people, can participate in the decisions about the commons. In other words, where they can share a platform, right? So if we think about it's not just my benefit, but it's also my kids, or my cousins, or my friends, then we stop kind of railroading ourselves into the tragedy. Not to say that the tragedy cannot happen, but just like the trench warfare, the tragedy is not the only solution to the problem. Now, I promised to mention a couple more words about conflict and conflict on this platform. A lot of us don't like conflict. And it would be difficult to pick out 5 people in the room that would say, yeah, I'm really happy with conflict. But if you think about it, when music is played, if music was played only with beautiful chords, it wouldn't be very interesting music. So the interesting thing in the music is the tension, right? The tension and resolution of the tension and the resolving of that tension, bringing back new tension that needs to get resolved. So if you think about nature, if you think about, for example, atmospheric dynamics and La Niña, El Niño, similar things are happening in there. There's tension that gets resolved that brings up another tension that gets resolved. This gets a dance. So conflict and tension is a source of energy, source of dynamism. Now the question is whether one can take that source of energy and dynamism and turn it into something that is, good for life, that that helps people grow, or something that ends up us versus them as a trench warfare. So as you graduating students go out into the world and think about this, follow your hearts. You have great hearts and great minds. Think about what makes you wake up every morning. Think about what makes you just a little bit more alive or just a little bit less alive, and choose life. Don't be afraid of conflict. But when you are in conflict, look at the opponent as somebody that is human, that you can have a conflict on a common platform. And in that way, by choosing life not only for yourself, but for those that are within your larger sense of the I, you'll do great things. So, thank you very much.
Graduates, may you embrace the landscapes you are moving into without hesitation or regret, giving yourself fully like river rushing into sea, ever flowing, ever deepening into the wild expanses within and all around you, risking being disturbed and changed so that your heart may open without fear or anxiety, seeing the humanity in every person, embodying deep kindness to all living beings. May the sacred bless you and give you peace in this living. Amen.